Welcome back to another edition of the Educational AD Podcast. We couldn't do this without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to start by saying thank you to all of them. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to thank our platinum sponsors, Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Gilman Gear, always a step ahead. Camp Mobile, where teams communicate better. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. And Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. Thank you to all of our great sponsors. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. We're going out to the West Coast today. Nathan Stanley, he's a certified athletic administrator, and he's the director of athletics at Lake Oswego High School in Lake Oswego, Oregon. Nate, welcome to the program.
Thanks. And it's actually Lakeridge in Lake Oswego. Lake Oswego's our arch nemesis across the lake. So although in most of the country, that wouldn't be a big deal if my community.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. We're traveling out to the West Coast and my home state, Oregon, today. Nathan Stanley, he's a certified athletic administrator, and he's the athletic director at Lakeridge High School in Lake Oswego, Oregon. Nate, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Jake.
Well, as we've already talked a little bit before we went on the air, it's a busy time for ADs, so we're going to jump right into it. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and maybe how your love of sports led to that first teaching and coaching job.
Yeah, so grew up in the Portland metro area in Oregon, and went to Clackamas High School in the kind of what was Milwaukee, Oregon, and the school's actually moved now, but to kind of where the community is based out of. But went to Pacific University, so we're both boxers.
Absolutely.
And I did my undergraduate there. I wrestled in college. I was an All-American my senior year at 177 pounds in that weight class, back when that was a weight class. And then got my master's degree, did the MAT, fifth year, and got my master's and started coaching. And, in terms of, for me, I think athletics has always been just such a big part of my life. It's funny, when I was younger, I didn't really kind of perceive myself as being very athletic. And over time, as I became better at things and more competitive, it was a real sense of, it gave me a lot of confidence and self-esteem, those things that we talk about. And then, of course, the relationships that you develop. And, for me, as I started coaching, as a head coach for 18 years, 13 as a head wrestling coach. And then my last 5 in coaching, I was a head football coach, which is a real interesting story how that happened. But I loved doing both, and just the interaction that you get with kids. I love working with coaches. I think being an athletic director now, there's that opportunity for you to be able to work with coaches and help with coaches as well as with kids. And it's not quite the same as coaching, but it's still an important job, and one that, as we know, not everyone can do. So.
Oh, absolutely. But again, fairly typical pattern. Talk about that transition from being a coach and head coach to becoming the athletic director. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was in Redmond, Oregon, which is in Central Oregon near Bend. If people are familiar with the geography of Oregon, it's high desert. So most people think of Western Oregon as being typical, which is lots of rain. That was a place where it rains 9 inches or less a year. They have over 300 days of sun. But it's cold in the winter. It's hot in the summer. It's a really beautiful place, but it's quite different than Western Oregon and the Portland metro area. And so at one point in time, Redmond was the fastest growing city and the fastest growing county in the country. That was prior to 2008. And so our city was growing so fast that we had voted to build a new high school. And so the school split. Of course, the bond was passed in 2008, right before the financial crisis. And so we went from having 2,200 kids in our high school down to about 1,600, which changed things quite a bit in terms of our needs for a new high school. But when the school split, that came for an opportunity. The AD position had been an administrative role, and it became a TOSA. And so I'd been pretty successful as a wrestling coach. And so I didn't want to give up coaching at that point because we had a really good team coming back. And so I convinced some people to allow me to coach and be the AD. And when we went to go hire a football coach, and the entire time I'd been a wrestling coach, I was an assistant football coach, and a lot of that was at the varsity level. And we went to try to hire a football coach, and we offered it to a couple of different people. No one would take it because of insecurity with the job market at that time, with people worrying about getting riffed. And so it got to the point where we had some dads that wanted to coach it by committee. And I said to the vice principal, who was kind of leading the process, I said, these people can be on the bus, but they can't drive the bus. I mean, we can't have a coach by committee. And so what do you think about me trying that? And so I held actually both the head wrestling and head football and athletic director position for a few months. And then we were able to hire someone who I was real comfortable taking over the job for me. They were pretty successful that year and ended up, I think, third in the state in wrestling. And then my first year as a head football coach, it's kind of funny. We weren't very good the previous 4 years, but we ended up going 11-1 that first year and making it to the semifinals. And it was kind of a magical year for us. And so that transition, I think my first couple of years as an AD, I thought very much like a coach. And so I was trying to, problem solve my team, the athletic department. And probably I would say one of the areas of growth that I've had is trying to look at what we do from a more holistic perspective, not just through a coach's eyes or through that bias, but also through what the students are experiencing as well as the parents. And so, I spent 5 years as a coach AD, and then we made a decision to move back here to Portland, the Portland area, I should say. And so I took a job at Cleveland High School, which is in inner Southeast Portland. And then last year I had the opportunity to take a change in roles and go from a TOSA, or teacher on special assignment, into being an administrator as well. So I'm an assistant principal as well as the athletic director. So most of my job has to do with athletics, but I'm doing a lot with teaching and learning, and especially now with we're kind of on hold with athletics. I'm trying to work on some stuff over here on the side while I'm picking up some responsibilities from the other assistant principals and administrators here, because they are right now up to their nose and trying to navigate this digital virtual educational landscape that we're engaged in right now.
It sounds like a great journey. You've got to see, different parts of the state, and as well as work with, a lot of different people. In our profession, we always talk about the importance of leadership and mentorship. And I'm curious, who were some of your mentors, either as, coaches or people that you worked for or worked with, folks that you can still hear their voice today as you talk with your coaches or your teams?
Yeah, as a coach, I mean, obviously my high school coaches were tremendously influential and continued to be influential into my career. And I was blessed as a young coach I got hired at Sandy High School right out of college. And I went to work for a man named Don McCarty, who at one point was the dean of coaches in the state of Oregon. And to this day, I've never been a part of a program where people just had such a love for being a part of that program. And I've been a part of really good programs since and coached for a man named Craig Rooker, who has won over 300 games here in Oregon, which is really hard with, a limit of 14 games a year from start to finish if you win the state title. And so, but Don really gave me the foundation for everything that I did in my programs from there on out. And then I was able to learn from Craig Rooker, and still do talk to him today. He's retired now, but and then something that I did that I'm still continue to do is that I try to reach out to people outside of especially as a coach, because we look at football or wrestling or basketball as a finite game, right? We're in competition with one another, which really, from my level now, I kind of look at it more from an infinite game, that it's not a zero-sum game, that we can all grow and get something out of this regardless of the score at the end of the night. But I developed this habit where I try to go outside of my area and find somebody that was doing what I wanted to do and engage them in trying to pick their brain. And I've always found that when you do that as a coach, and I did that with the Tierpellis in Clovis, California, with Dave Kroll in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, for wrestling, for football, Dale Mueller in Northern Kentucky, Rick Darlington in Apopka, Florida, Randy Jackson in the Metroplex in Texas. And I still have those relationships with those people today where they can ask me questions and I can get them. And, like Randy always jokes, he's so far away from home, he feels like he could give you a social security number and nothing would happen to him, and I carried that into being an AD. And so Dave Hood was, who's the president of the OADA now, and he's retired from his job in the Bend Lapine School District, but he helped me a tremendous amount as a really young AD. The person that preceded me, Brent Walsh, I called him all the time, and he wasn't even working in our district anymore, and he helped me a tremendous amount. And I think one of the cool learnings that I've had as an AD that is our colleagues, they're the people that work with us in the building, but really the people that we work with are the other ADs. And we've been going through that right now. I got a text last night asking me to reach out to all these ADs to see, what are you doing right now with your kids? And we can talk about where we're at with COVID here in a little bit. But if we were all in some sort of finite game where we're trying to beat each other and this and that, we wouldn't be able to have those relationships. And so understanding that anytime I can help out another AD by moving the game time, or by, trying to be a good host, or, dealing with an issue that she or he may have with a parent, those are the things. Actually, that's one of the best parts of our job, I think, is when we're able to help each other out. So.
Oh, I'd agree 100%. I think as coaches, we tend to keep things close to the vest. We don't want to give away any of those trade secrets. And as ADs, it's just the opposite.
Mhm.
It's a very, very collegial profession. Um, you've been AD now for, we'll say, a few years. And, it used to be, we would ask the question, well, how has the job of an AD changed in the last 20 years? Well, that's too big of a chunk. Let's narrow it down, maybe just 10 years or since you moved from Redmond. How has the day-to-day routine for you changed as an athletic administrator in the past few years?
I would say that's an interesting question. I think that when I was probably just starting out as a coach, or even back when I was in high school, the AD was at every single event. Not that we're not now, but it was a lot of being an event manager. Um, uh, and there was some oversight, but I think over my career, both as a coach and then obviously as an athletic director, the importance of not just being a manager but being a leader, and leading and helping develop coaches, and set a direction for the athletic department as a whole, and getting on people on board with that vision has continued to develop and become more important and a bigger part of the job. And I think as we have kind of embraced the idea of education-based athletics, and trying to find ways to get people to buy into that, because I mean, we watch ESPN, we love sports, so we're watching college football, we're watching the NBA, those sorts of things, and those are either quasi or fully professional sports, and it's a little different than what we're trying to do at our level. And that's a hard sell sometimes, but it's something that we're passionate about, and it's very rewarding, I think, to when you make those gains with kids or with coaches. And so and then obviously um, I told a coach this yesterday, actually my counterpart at Lake Oswego High School, he's new this year, and I told him, I said, as a coach, and even early on as an AD, I kind of I was a little bit like I think of Alexander the Great, when he went off to conquer the known world. He cut the Gordian knot. He didn't have a committee and run a survey and ask permission here and there. He just did it, right? And so a little bit of that, ready, fire, aim type of attitude. And I think that there's a place and time for that, but understanding the importance of compliance, understanding the importance of getting opinions. I was much more, especially early on as my first couple of years as an AD, is that I was going to set the direction. Everyone's going to get on board. And now I'm much more collaborative. I sent out a flip meeting yesterday to my coaches, where we had our kickoff meeting, which I just recorded myself for 30 minutes, going over kind of what I saw last year, my first year here at Lakeridge, an assessment of what are the areas that we need to address, and how we're going to address that. And then setting up process for developing a strategic plan for our athletic department here at Lakeridge, and having a youth sports summit as a part, and then how we're going to involve student athletes, how we're going to involve the coaches in that, and then how we're going to involve other key stakeholders in that process. And so that wouldn't have been something I was all that interested in doing 9 years ago. But it's, something that I'm committed to now, and I think it's for the better.
Oh, yeah, I think we all, go through those growth experiences. Some of the things you're talking about, I can see it like it's yesterday with myself as a
Mhm.
younger AD. We talked a little bit about COVID. Let's go ahead and get that out there. One thing we've seen is that there is no single best practice. We've seen a variety of responses across the country and sometimes even within states. Um, Understanding that, this is late August when we're talking right now, and this isn't going to air until, when is this going to air? October 2nd. Um, what's happening right now in Oregon? What's happening right now in your district?
Where we're at right now, we just came out of the summer. And so in Oregon, the OSAA's association year typically goes from the Memorial Day in the spring until our first day of practice. And so we actually should have had practice last week on the 17th for the first day, first official practice for us. The OSAA changed that. It's actually the 31st, which is Monday. And so we have shifted all of our organized sports seasons, beginning with winter to January for 7 weeks, a 7-week season, and then we'll have fall sports and then follow that up with spring sports. And so there'll be some overlapping on all of those sports. So we're about to go into what we call season one. And season one is going to be basically like the summer, but it's during the association year. All coaches have to be certified. All players have to have a physical. And for our district, when we reach that point where we're going to allow that to happen, we'll go ahead and require all the kids to and their parents to complete online registration and all that. Some local districts are allowing their teams to start on Monday. They're handling it in a number of different ways. Some of them, it's just kind of, the Wild West, and they're treating it like the summer. So if basketball is going, or if right now we can't actually in the high risk sports such as football, wrestling, basketball, lacrosse, rugby, those aren't allowed to have any full contact, but they could have drills where they could, pass the ball, shooting drills, those sorts of things. Our state, for some reason, has categorized 7-on-7 football as a medium risk, so it can take place outside, which obviously you play football outside, at least here. And we're not Texas with indoor practice facilities and things like that yet. But, so that's sort of where we're at. In our district, we put a pause on that for a couple of different reasons that has more to do with education. And the governor basically set very strict metrics in terms of what the testing rate has to be in order for us to allow students into the building. And even though athletics doesn't have to fit into that, there was a feeling that we needed to really get a handle on what that looked like before we were inviting student athletes back in. So I'm hopeful right now. Like I said, I was doing research last night on where everyone else is at in our area, putting together some information for our school district cabinet, and they're discussing that. And I'm hoping that within the next couple of weeks, we can offer some activities for our student athletes. I think you're muted. Or
I'm a professional at this. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's so tough, and we talked about this earlier about just the unknown. In Florida, the normal start date for fall sports, football, volleyball, et cetera, this year would have been July 27th. And there were schools that were down in the south part of the state, Miami-Dade, Broward County, that hadn't even been back to campus since they closed in March for COVID. And so, our schools up in the Panhandle and other parts, we've been doing summer activities. And so we ended up delaying the start of fall sports to August 24th. But some schools, again, still have not even been back. So it's crazy. Let's go and shift gears a little bit. What are some of the favorite parts of being the athletic director at Lakeridge? What gets you excited about coming to work each day?
I think for me, and that's one of the things that we don't get quite so much. It's right now with, as an administrator, I'm in the building every day, but our teachers aren't here. They're telecommuting. Maybe that's a outdated term now. They're virtually commuting, whatever. But that daily interaction with teachers, with coaches, with kids, with parents, I that's one of the wonderful things about the job. I think the way that no matter how organized or how much you plan, that every day is going to be different, and that we build a routine into what we do, but that there's, as much as things stay the same, things change, and so there's no boredom in what we do at all. I love the flexibility of what we do too. And as a TOSA, both at Cleveland and at Redmond, it was a much more flexible job, but it was really nice to not have like a firm schedule. And I'm in, I would say, probably a few more meetings now than I used to be. So not as flexible, but it's still a really flexible job, and it's demanding. I've had multiple superintendents and principals say it's the toughest job they've ever had. I don't know what that says about us or being a principal or a superintendent, but those are the things I love. That, like I said, the collegial relationship and the symbiosis maybe that we have with other athletic directors, working with one another, and being able to help each other out is really rewarding. And then, when you're able to, not being able to coach anymore, you lose that sort of the real more personal interactions with kids. And so when you're able to help a kid, and I'm thinking about a couple of different times where we had a student, I'm thinking about back when I was at Redmond, we had a student athlete who who hadn't been attending classes. We caught it through an attendance report, went to the coach, said that he can't play today. And I hadn't had a chance to talk with the kid, and I was really kind of mad at him, one of our best athletes in the school. And I went and was talking to an assistant coach, and I kind of made a comment. And he said, yeah, with everything he's going through. And I said, well, talk to me about that. What's going on? And his mom had moved to Missouri and just left him. Didn't give him any money, didn't set him up with a place to stay, didn't have anyone to watch him. So he was living on one of our graduates' couch. And so I'm like, oh, I had why didn't anyone tell me this? Number one. And so we were able to go get him, get him declared an unaccompanied student under the McKinney-Vento law, and was able to get him set up with food and found a place for him to live and transportation and other things like that. And it's things like that where you're able to really help and impact a kid's life is really rewarding. So that'll probably be about, it doesn't get much better than that. So, yeah.
Oh no, people outside our profession would call those small victories, but you and I know those are the huge ones. When you can help a kid, or a parent comes in and they're just steaming, and you're able to 15, 20, 30 minutes later have them walk out the door and they're feeling a lot better, whether they got their way or not. At least they got it off their chest. Those it's part of the job. Okay. And it's not going to go away. So if you're not ready for it, maybe you shouldn't be an AD, but obviously You're doing a great job. Well, Nate, this has just flown by, but we're not done yet.
Okay.
We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're a successful athletic director, and I'm tasking you with sending out a brand new AD on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Nathan Stanley's athletic director toolbox?
I think the first thing would be perspective. I think something that served me really well uh, in my career as an athletic director is the ability to understand what I can control and what I can't, and trying to maintain that perspective. And there's all sorts of lessons that I've learned over time. And one thing I've learned is that it's also it's state dependent. So it's a state, not a trait, because with my children, I am not as stoic as I am in my job as an athletic director, but I think it's really helped me from a mental health perspective. I know one of the things that we combat as a profession is burnout, and people leaving the profession after a short period of time. I think something like 30% of the athletic directors in the state of Oregon were new last year to their positions, and of course that includes me. Being somebody that has been doing it for a while. So it may be, but I'm guessing probably 20% were brand new ADs. And so that's a lot of turnover. And I think a big part of that is that we personalize performance, and as opposed to being able to separate what we do from who we are. And so I think perspective is really important. I would say the second thing is I'd throw out there servant leadership, and whether you're trying to be a when you get into looking at this, saying transformational leader or servant leader, like some of us, they're synonyms, right? Other people, they'll argue with us that they're complete and total different concepts. But understanding what kind of a leader you want to be, and then being intentional about doing that. So for me, both as an administrator and as an athletic director, I've tried to commit and create accountability partners with my people that I'm working with, that I'm trying to be a servant leader. And so by saying that out loud, I don't want you to beat me with it, but remind me if I'm not doing it. Have the courtesy to pat me on the back when I'm doing a good job, and the respect to tell me when I'm not. And so then the last thing I think would be, so if we talked about perspective and then understanding leadership, I think the last thing would be, and I had it in my head and it just flew out, but I think that last thing would be, I think Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls it anti-fragile. He wrote a whole book about it. But I think, and this kind of goes into, it feeds in the other two, when people criticize us, or they come at us, or they come after a coach or whatever it is, I think instead of thinking about how do I react to this, or how do I do that, I've tried to say, how can I make this a growth opportunity and get better from this? And so the idea of being anti-fragile is that it's not fragility and then robustness. It's actually, anti-fragility is the opposite of fragility. And so the idea is that as we get beaten up by something, or we make a mistake, or someone criticizes us, to take that and make ourselves stronger as a result, I think is something that a couple years ago I started doing. And all of a sudden, girls soccer parent emailing me about conditions at Powell Park didn't become like a criticism of myself. It was an opportunity for me to get better and to make the program better. And so I've kind of looked at those two things, and I know that as a result, I'm better as an AD today than I was 3 years ago, and in 3 years I'm going to be better at what I do than I am right now. And so it's a little bit growth mindset, a little bit anti-fragility, but I think that those three things, perspective, understanding of your leadership and what you want to do, what your purpose is, and then being anti-fragile are three important concepts.
Oh, I love it. I picked up something new. I'm going to be looking up that anti-fragility when we're done makes me think about being resilient, coming back. Great stuff. Nathan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I didn't mention this, but thank you also for being a member of our presentation faculty back in April when we had our state conference, one of the few and first virtual conferences across the country. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. It's stuff like this is fun to do, and it's good to reach out. And I got an email actually just yesterday from someone, I don't even know where they're from, wanting to talk about core values. They had read something that I had written, and it's fun because one, you get to share with people, and two, it makes you review and analyze what you're doing. And I wrote this back then, and so yeah, you got to walk the talk, so to speak. So
oh, absolutely. Well, best of luck in Oregon as things continue to progress. And again, this is going to air on October 2nd. Hopefully we'll see you in person down in Tampa in December at the national conference.
That's the goal. That's the goal, right?
Well,
So
take it
wash your
easy.
hands.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, wash your hands so we can all go. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Don't mess this up for the rest of us.
That's right.
Well, to our listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. Come back again next time for another edition of the Educational AD.